Let's try this again. I'm Professor Baldwin. This is the asynchronous class at SBU, THR 103, Technology and Performance, or Introduction to Theatrical Design. We've expanded this, my associate Rick DeRochers and myself. He teaches at Lehman College, CUNY, to not only a sort of class demonstration of the tools, the techniques, and above all, the theories of aesthetics and sociology and so forth that go into a work of art, theatrical production. But this is going to be in concomitant with a devised piece based on King Lear. Further into the class, or as I use this introductory YouTube to sort of explain our methods and so forth, we are going to be using the tools to make a devised piece, the texts, his writing that goes into more or less a reaction, a response to King Lear, using his own father as sort of a biographical data. And then above all, help you understand how to demystify the process of making a devised piece, whether you are interested in yourself or are curious about what goes into such a work, and to hopefully increase what I consider the core of a work of art, which is often missing nowadays in this era of propaganda and mind mapping, and where the map is supposed to represent the territory, that we are going over the wonderful aspects of debate, discussion, and discourse over any work of art on top of enjoyment. It should be a public medium to which you can communicate with your fellow human beings, your friends, your family, your intimates, your strangers, and that is what a work of art is, as a form of communication, is well adept to do. But that art of communicating in the form of debate has been lost. So I start off at the very end of our spring semester in devising these pieces. We will be also doing some interviews at Theater Lab, an off-Broadway venue to which we have a 2-week residency, where we should devise this thing. So let me go over the syllabus. And as a note, I am recording all of this from my MacBook Pro 16-inch computer, which has, I forget the graphics card, but it might get throttled. It always does, especially when we get deeper into programs such as SketchUp or other CAD programs. The poor baby wants to quit sometimes. So we might have choppy little sections of video that I'm going to add to my YouTube site, but the through line should be there. Let's start with the syllabus. It says summer 2020, but we're in summer 2022. So it's the same format. I have the written syllabus that I did to get through the curriculum committee, but often the map is mistaken for the terrain, and I consider the terrain much more important with a map of what we're going to do as one of the bases. So let's start. This is my structure. We talk about lectures, skills, the project. As a form, I teach a lot of classes in creative technology, art and technology, design methods, methodologies, And this is one of my formats, or the format I've been using for over 30 years in teaching design. I've come out of a design tradition with my dad is a landscape architect, a professor also, and urban planner guy. And this is a sort of method to bring out the answers from you, rather than pump you full of prejudices or formats or other things that just get you through the subject. So let's start. Lecture, skills, projects. You see on the upper left there, I think it's your left. Um, Synchronous, what we're talking about in the lectures. Usually the ideas. Like to start with the context of ideas around this. A craftsperson, a kind of more or less a bean counter of engineer, just attempt to follow the rules of getting bridges up, or making running water work on stages and things like that. I do not subscribe to that. I feel a scenographer, an installation person, and anyone bringing to a collective work is also a viable artist, not only listening to the singular vision of director writer, but also bringing their own discursive form to this. And this is part, I'll keep going back to this. I'm utterly convinced at this age in my life, art is about debate, or creating a context of a debate. And any art form that attempts to shut this down has some sort of spurious agenda behind it, which is also interesting in itself when we see the world of NFTs, the art market as a way of buying and selling and controlling markets and controlling profits, a form of pump and dump aspect to it. But the theater realm is the same. Why do we make stuff that then this stuff goes in front of a collective of people, especially post-COVID, where these people usually have to sit in a dark theater together and watch a collective spectacle and not only empathize with people on stage, but also with each other in the audience. There is an added feature that the performer, like the professor, gets a feedback from the audience too, an inspiration, an immediate feedback. And this is, again, a very important aspect of human beings as hopefully empathetic creatures who look for public places to communicate these things. So under the lectures, we'll approach topics. The skills are out there, such as CAD. We'll be using SketchUp, and you'll be having a sketchbook to, I often go back to this, not so much to put you in some sort of pain, but to hopefully get a feedback, hopefully get you to use another intelligence in your tool set to form reality. I really don't care if you want to be a butcher, baker, candlestick maker when you grow up, or what your major is, and so forth. I find that given the 80-20 rule, that 80% of my students often consider this painful, and it is often painful to look at when they do sketch, but also 20% start to develop another set of skills, visual and thinking skills behind sketching. So that within the skill set, dealing with DAWs, dealing with code, VPLs, Max MSP, dealing with a sketchbook, dealing with SketchUp, loading this into spatial I/O, loading this onto a stage. These how-to things are vastly important. And in the third section there, the project, where what are we pushing? What are we pushing through time that will go up as a collective public project and that we can see together, and so forth. Let us continue. Let us continue this. Oops, there we are. Week 1. In week 1, we're lecturing on the total theater, the stage as a machine, human factors and usability. What usability comes from all this internet talk of what's the screen? How do we make it presentable? How do we seduce people into clickbait and clicking around the screen like they're Pavlovian dogs? But the stage is the quintessential sort of form for that. We have high-speed internet now, so many of us don't even go to broadcast media anymore. We always had that relationship when film and then when television came out that theater was going to die. It hasn't died yet, because I do believe there are theaters of politics, what happens in the street, theater of just human situations. This public aspect of theater has remained for thousands and thousands of years, and we have our specific shaman, individuals who stand on the stage and render focus, and that we can reflect on this. We have circled campfires for many tens of thousands of years, with fires at night, cooking our meat, smelling to the wild animals beyond at night. And these were very dangerous spaces. These were spaces we looked into each other's eyes over that fire as far back as they think even 2 million years ago with Homo erectus, and we looked at each other. And this follows the theory that actually cooking was one of the social bonds of the Homo sapien. We looked at each other for hope. Tell me a story. Tell me a story so that I don't think about these nocturnal predators, these apex predators behind us, that we've made this fire to maybe scare them off, to make them think we're other than just, of easy meat for them to eat. And in that, looking in each other's eyes across the campfire, before there were shamans who were better at telling stories and actually memorized whole tracks before we even had writing, we did look to these public situations, often over food, for this. So we'll get into the origins of this, which I'm vastly interested in, up to the meta web. What does the web do? And then at the end, we're also going to be using tricks that are out there from experiments with Google on turning your camera into AI. We'll be talking about machine learning and AI, and what from that very primordial start around that campfire is frightened hominids. Where are we going with storytelling and AI? We'll look at particular experiments in this as it starts up. We'll be talking a lot about composition, architecture, public immersive environments, time and space in the performance machine. You will start a blog of 20 essays on, I'm going to keep it very freeform in the beginning, from these lectures, to be inspired by lectures. Talk about the origins of theater. Was the campfire the origin of theaters? Was the campfire an origin of storytelling? And so forth. We jump to the middle section there. Skills. We're going to start Maximus P. I came to coding quite late in my life, line coding. So we're going to be using VPLs, visual programming languages, to help us deal with creative technology, creative computing, in augmenting this fundamental story around a campfire. So with a beginning with your 20 blogs, reactions, 3 paragraphs, no footnotes, don't plagiarize. As kind of a balance, again, a balanced debate, a balanced argument, a premise, conclusion. What are we thinking about this beginning of the theater? What are these topics that emerge, such as AI, such as the metaphysical and the political import of King Lear? When Rick transposes that story to his father and the concept therein, what does this imply in terms of identity, race, class, gender, these things? What we are not brains floating in vats. So what, rather than what does that shut down, what does that open up in terms of a very civilized discourse? Through this all, don't get me wrong, I love spending time in the comfy chair talking about theory, having debate with smart people, but I also like making things. Makers, hackers, cobbling things together, experimenting, is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful part of this that has exploded as a world of storytelling. Is what kind of gimmicks, as it were, can we add to the general storytelling, and then what can we extract from there? And our projects. You see on the right there, gaming structure, game theory as a global lingua franca. Do we think in games now? From that early game to keep the wild beasts off and keep us fed, and to transform our food into a better, whether it's vegetable or meat, into better digestible things through the use of fires. We were the only animal who could use this. Homo erectus was conjectured to be the first. Did they have stories? Did they sit around the fire telling these stories? What progressed in human consciousness with this notion of looking at each other in the round, and there's still theaters in the round, and then what expands out there? So gaming is something we'll explore, a good subject for an essay. I'll try and raise my finger and say that's a perfect topic for a blog. Mobile computing, what does that mean when we are everywhere and nowhere? One of my research directions is VR, virtual reality, mixed reality. There are a bunch of hypey names for it, but it's basically trying to get away from this old word of multimedia into combined medias, extended reality. I don't tend to like that word reality behind all of this. But what's the recent meta? Meta is the recent hypey word that Facebook and Zuckerberg wants to sort of brand as something that's beyond just staring at little screens, or beyond just even staring at little screens on your phone. What have phones done to the theatrical realm, the public performance realm, and so forth? So we progress down there. Mobile computing, brick and mortar, management and creativity enhancement, interior architecture as interface, which is one of my loves, having come from a more or less architectural design background, and have gone into the immersive space field now, AR, VR, surface projections, and so forth. Space, time, and causality, getting the great idea and turning it into a play, which is what we're doing in this devised piece. This is a beautiful and fecund world, gang. I'm so passionate about this. I'm kind of sedate in this nightscape here, giving my first lecture, but I want to impress upon you that, again, wherever, however you go off into your life and study hard to, pay the rent, but also to um, feed the soul, as it were, what it needs in terms of aesthetic, debate, community, meaning, very existential reasons and so forth. So I'll be going over those also. So this is typical. We start Max and we talk about drafting and budgeting and how do we bring others into this collective project, and we'll use tools such as SketchUp and so forth to do this with. Let's proceed. Week 2, and I'm going to try and, because I have films for you to see to bring it all together. One of the raps or criticism made of me is I seem scattered. Thank you for noticing. That is done on purpose because of an explosion of information and tools, an explosion of cultures that have finally met each other through something called the internet. And that's kind of the way reality comes at you nowadays. If you haven't noticed, or you haven't been in a coma for a while, this is the way it's coming at you. It's your job to edit it. So I'm more interested in your answers. When I am ambiguous, that is for a reason. This will be on purpose. So looking at all this, reading software, online film viewing. We're going to view King Lear. I've selected some. Most of them will be free. When there is one or two that has to be paid for on Amazon or Netflix or YouTube, I'll state this. And then we'll start by sketching. You will keep a sketchbook, a little personal sketchbook. I have one that I'm reaching for right now in my pocket. Excuse me. I prefer this to be something nice, something you keep on your person. I've also ordered a camera where I can actually point down and show just what we're working on in terms of ideas behind 3D design and all of that. But mine's a little leather-bound thing I got at Barnes & Noble. I got about, 70, 80 of these. And I keep them, I don't know how I can show you. I keep the ideas and the sketching and a way to freeze this in and on a piece of paper. And again, this renders your eyes, your hand, your own voice in distilling this reality into and onto a piece of paper, which is much, much, much different than the pecking away at these computers, certainly pecking away at cell phones. The new TikTok culture, which is fascinating, is subtly changing our consciousness to the really quick things. Whereas the sketchbook, the blogs, the use of the more or less the journaling, sketch journaling, written journaling in the form of blogs, is a very important way of anchoring. I think I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, the semiotician linguist, Kobiński, a Polish-American guy. And a lot of people respond to him also. He was famous for saying the map is not the territory. Another famous quote of his is looking for reality through the use of language is like looking for the darkness with a flashlight. that has something here, that we're actually just pointing to what our realities or our perceptions of realities are through art making and so forth. The third thing he talked about is the very wonderful analysis. It's a model. Plants bind energy. Plants take the energy from the sun. Animals bind space in general. They migrate. They have territorial battles. They look for territory with food. And humans bind time. We continue to build jet airplanes, 747s, and so forth, on the accumulation of knowledge written down in archives so the next generation can learn it. You are in school for interminably long times now because of your necessity to enter a very complicated world by binding time. You're taking the knowledge, the mistakes, the successes of the past, and forging them for the future, perhaps turning a buck by them, perhaps not, perhaps reading or viewing or seeing through enjoyment, perhaps not. And we are this animal that binds time, which leads me to my hypothesis of what does AI do then? If AI can get rid of our jobs, control everything, guide our cars, and so forth, what does AI bind? I contend that AI binds stories. That it will one day, it has already in the form of the internet. It was up until 2002 that the entirety of human objects and consciousness and texts and other material forms were scanned. And since 2003, the totality of human archives, thanks to scanning and now thanks to AI, is replicated every 3 days. And some people say it is replicated every 3 hours. So this is an amazing time. We're living in this era where there's a lot of information out there. What do we do with it? Do we swim with it? Now we have AI telling us what is important in this. We have whole cities that we are guided by our GPS, and it saddens me sometimes that, and I do this a little bit too, that I don't even view landmarks anymore in a city, or sort of fudge around on my directions, or use a map, use mistakes to get around. Again, theater's like this. Do we want to defer to AI to look for our searches, to find these answers, to quit the aspect of discussing discourse over subjects such as meaning, death and obscurity, of a couple of these other existential concerns, identity, and so forth. What do we? What would AI actually help us in this greater capacity to tell stories if the end sort of desired effect is one of communion, empathy, a search or a statement for meaning in the face of obscurity, and so forth. Let's continue through this syllabus. Week 3, we're dealing with lecture skills project. Broadening this aspect of theater, what it takes, actors, method, or Brechtian, or Grotowskian, or Augusto Boal, I had lunch with once years ago, 20 years ago. Important gentlemen sort of revising the Aristotelian arc and saying that was the first social coercion, the way Aristotle talked about how an audience will get this capacity to be less and to be slaves and to be subservient to the dominant stories of a society because they see great men such as Oedipus fall and they're experiencing the catharsis. Well, at least it's not me. We'll explore those bigger ideas. And again, making art without ideas to me is pointless. Many people make pretty pictures and fluffy films and things like that. I just couldn't be bothered. So you're going to have to hang with my view of this. Technique follows discourse. Let's call it discourse. Many people say Wissen and Kennen in German and Technos and Gnosos in ancient Greek. I'm just saying technique follows the possibility of discourse, aesthetic and otherwise. Lifestyle enhancement, that's what design does. Travel and tourism, what stories you tell yourself when you're traveling. Personal dramaturgy, what the hell is that? Do you keep restructuring a story you tell yourself? Infoscape. An infoscape, is that an amusement park like Disneyland or a ride? Branding is a kind of a sinister word coming out of neoliberal capitalism that has this idea that we can brand ourselves, turn ourselves into commodities, float above ourselves to look in and see what we could possibly unify within ourselves so others would recognize us for our face value. It's very interesting. So a lot of sites online, certainly social media is very interesting. Online dating sites is this like self-branding. There's fabulous stories within the formatting of social media. Your jobs, LinkedIn. What's the other one? Indeed, I think. How you find jobs. Is your narrative, is your story going to fit the company? Should it? What is money? Money is to me like love. No one quite knows what it is. It's been around for a while, but we have this assumption that money and love should grow. Does it always? Can it always on a finite planet? Money and love and war. We are now currently engaged in this series of proxy wars, and we have one now. What does theater have to do with war? What does theater, and by theater I mean larger narratives, have to do with propaganda? We'll explore that. We'll deal with interactive public arts, retail design, event design, architecture. Where are we seeing pure commodity and where are we seeing objects, as Immanuel Kant would say, which are things in themselves that stand outside of just what the monetary value of that thing is? When you assume that you no longer have the Midas touch on people you love, your family, your offspring, your spouses, your lovers, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, anything where you suddenly go, oh, whew, I'm outside this world of self-quantification. Are you really? Or is that just a form of hypocrisy? Does that lead us to another theater, the theater of the self in psychology? Am I just kidding myself, saying that I can turn on and off this realm? Up to 33 minutes. I know I might be throttled here soon with the level of memory. Let me roar through this. You'll get this syllabus. Present sound concept with projections. We'll deal with DAWs, digital audio workstation. Instead of designing theater, I have my students design a media club or a nightclub, because there's so many loose narratives going on in that. You have presentation of self, peacocks, attractiveness, loud music. Is it a womb? Is it a return back to the big thumping womb? Is it a space of frustration? Is it a space of eros and erotica? Is it a space of inebriation or supreme lonely sobriety where you enter and saying, is this all there is to life? And this is what nightclubs have, a way of transforming us when we enter into this public space. So I usually have my students work on designing one. The software of the DAWs, we'll get back to drafting and budgeting these ideas in the space and more of that. Let's go on, and there's more to it, but you'll get an idea when we go over that blow by blow. Week 4, again, the max code Markov chains is machine learning. There's a thing in Max MSP which I hope sparks ideas about self and so forth. We're going to be dealing with a strange, I turn her into a female, replica, which is an online AI avatar, which supposedly is using certain forms and forces of known IBM AI, I forget what it was, Watson, left online, and it has a conversation with you. Is it banal? Is it insightful? What is it? AI projection mapping is a fun thing people are doing all over Europe, America, South America, just taking projectors, screens, and projecting this on urban setting. And then your projects are your experiments with DAWs, Max, SketchUp, all these things, and then trying them out, getting into Sketchfab. Ultimately, we also want to point, in addition to this King Lear device piece, we are doing a hybrid piece online using Spatial IO, one of the first social VR sites, using 2 or 3 Oculus Rift, it's now a Facebook product, Oculus Rift 2, which is affordable, untethered, no wires, and it is another sort of rabbit hole dimension to stories and storytelling, which human beings seem to be endlessly inventive with. Again, back to our synchronous, which is now asynchronous presentation, architectural and visual composition. We integrate that with politics, ethics, religion, art, society, discourse, meaning, fate, identity, and all these really great existential demands that don't seem to go away affect that. We'll get into Ableton online, mapping programs, Sketchfab. We're going to try and experiment with other CAD programs which are out there and usable. As you see, we're progressing now. We get into present sound and concept with the projections. Design fundamentals. We're always going to get back to 2D, 3D, 4D, element of time design fundamentals. Get back to the basics. I come out of more or less a Bauhausian tradition in the rendering of three-dimensional space, which I think they really seriously looked at the aspects of design of the Neoplatonic design, and they expanded that. Museum design, gallery design. Again, in the lecture format, scenography, and this is week 5. Scenography for dance, film, opera, theater, infoscape design, again, mobile computing, VR, AR, XR, and AI, all these acronyms. 3D scanning, Bellis 3D, There are all these wonderful new free tools. Free, we'll explore that aspect of the word. Online free tools. Twines is a great program for developing non-linear storytelling in gaming. They did the Netflix Black Mirror show Bandersnatch in Twines, and we'll experiment with that. Experiment, and then the curtain goes up. So in a way, you have to be caught, when the curtain goes up, you have to be caught on a stage telling a story. As we get, I contend that our modern comics, especially when they're at their most controversial and their most inverting these expected propagandistic values, that they are our modern shaman. They are the modern people, men and women, who would have been leading the discussions around the fireplace, around the campfire, as the big apex predators, nocturnal predators surrounded us, wondering when this fire is going to go off. So we look to comedy often for this shamanic function. History, game form, and programming, assemble, convert, link, all these wonderful verbs that talk about bringing this project into its conclusion. A-Frame and other apps, that's another app of making sort of code online for VR, but that is sort of fallen by the wayside. These things have their moment in the sun, these programs. I'm trying to stay contemporary, but these things often change every 3 months. So I'm trying to stay up with what might be useful to our purposes of telling a story. Again, get back to it. We're telling a story. We're telling a story with the mise en scène, the surroundings, the context, the physical context. And again, that started around the campfire, a bunch of frightened little hominids telling each other stories as they were surrounded with danger. We have online film viewing. We have links to interactive performances. You're going to be seeing all these links and reacting in your 2020 blogs with this. Let's go up to week 6 in this wonderful 6-week series. Experiments, composition, blogs, project proposal, keynote to a book. I often have my classes make a book every semester because this is, I feel, still extremely important in binding time in a book form, paper form. Lest we forget, a rather large solar flare could jut out from our sun and wipe out all things electronic in one big fell swoop. It happened during the American Civil War. It happens at kind of a regularity too. And I think going back to these forms such as public performance, what else? Paper. And as we thought during our hideous long Zoom sessions under COVID, that what did they do during 1918 in the Spanish influenza? They sat inside and read, I guess. Kept their contact with other human beings down to a minimum, and continued to tell these stories before it more or less kind of burned out after a couple years, which hopefully this COVID thing seems to be doing. And that's it, gang. That's a sort of a working through. I have 40 blogs here. I've knocked it down to 20. And your sketchbook, your various projects in their files, and we sit back from that and we look at it, and you'll get your grade. Your grade, show me energy, show me a commitment to variation of form, a synthetic approach to reality. I know our fabulous institution, Stony Brook, is a tier one research university, more or less famous as a STEM school. But what is the tension between the arts and the sciences and technology? There's a continuing debate about this, and the debates are very interesting, more than the answers. There's a tradition, it's called logical positivism, or kind of a radical materialism, that one day all scientific discoveries will one day solve all human debates, human problems within 200 years or so. There's another side that says we're vitalists, that these aren't really answerable problems. Life presents itself to us in complexity. The big solar flare could reach out and knock out all our electronics. There are just too many black swans in life to subscribe to this idea that we're in this big clock-wound universe, and if we only bean count our way through the numbers of it, we'll be better people. It has often exposed this STEM penchant of a greater fragility of mental hygiene rather than eliminating it. So we're going to explore art as discourse and the making, shaping, forming, physical structure of art, scenography, architecture, media, 2D design, as a way of adding to storytelling. And when this comes up against antagonisms, there are ways of being delighted in those antagonisms, because life is spicy, or we hope it is. See you in the next video.